All right, let's pray and we'll begin. Dear Father, we just thank you for the glories of your handiworks, how we can look at your created order and we can see evidence of you there. And we just thank you that you've provided us with this, and we thank you for your love. We thank you for your special revelation by which you reveal your Son to us, and we just thank you for the work that he did for us on the cross. We ask all this in his name. Amen. All right, well, welcome to the fourth week in the Apologetics class. Just a bit of a review. So from our introduction class, we talked about what apologetics is. We said it's derived from the Greek word apologia, and that word's used, I think, 3 times in the New Testament. The most famous one is in 1 Peter 3:15, where Peter tells us to always be able to give a defense for the hope that's within us. Apologia means a reasoned defense. It was used like if you were in a trial and you gave a defense of what you did. You gave an apologia. Apologetics is positive. We put forth a positive case for Christianity to show that it's true. It's also negative, so we defend against arguments that would come against Christianity. Then we talked about why we do apologetics. We went over some verses that show how the Bible commands it, how the culture demands it, how the church needs it, and then the results confirming it. So this is just a quick review of the introduction. Here is the basic outline. The introduction would be above this. And I have these lines here to show different sections of the argument. Classical Christianity used to be known as the 2-step method. The first step was to establish that the theistic God exists, and the second step was to show that the Bible was true and that he was revealed to us through his Son. This section up here, these first two, truth about reality is noble, and that opposite of truth is falsity, were added at a time later as our culture became more and more relativistic. We needed to have before we could do pre-evangelism, we had to do a pre to that. And so we talk about about reality being noble, the opposite of true is false. So today, as it's highlighted here, we're going to be still on number 3, where it says it's true that the theistic God exists. Last week we looked at the cosmological argument, specifically the Kalam cosmological argument. Anyone still have that memorized? Want to give that argument for us?
If this and this are true, then this must be true.
No. Almost, yeah. You know, what are the this and this? Do you remember? No? You can give it a shot. It's okay if you get it somewhat right and somewhat wrong. Okay. Well, it is that the universe, anything that begins to exist has a cause. Anything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. We talked about support for those 2 premises, and we said that it was a valid argument. So if it's valid and the premises are true, then the conclusion is inescapably true. Then we talked about things we could know from that. If the universe has space, extension, and the being that brought the universe into existence is not part of that, then he doesn't have extension. So God doesn't have a body like us. If the beginning of the universe is the beginning of time, then obviously whoever brought the universe into existence is outside of time. Obviously, God is all-powerful if he brought the universe into existence. So those were some of the conclusions that we were able to draw from the cosmological argument. Today we'll be talking about the teleological argument. Well, just to finish this, so once we show that the theistic God exists, obviously if he is a theistic God, he can do miracles, and he could authenticate a message through a miracle. Then we're going to look at the New Testament and determine whether it's reliable, and if it's reliable, can we trust in it? Did Jesus' claims to be God, were they fulfilled? If Jesus is God, then whatever he says is true, and he said that the Bible's true. So that's how we're going to proceed. All right, so today the teleological argument. First we'll talk about telos and the final cause. Then we'll talk about specified complexity. We're not going to talk about irreducible complexity because I took that off, but it still stayed in the slide. We're talking about the argument, and we're going to talk about the support for the premises, then objections to the premises. So telos and the final cause. This is Aristotle. Remember last week we talked about a efficient cause, and we also talked about a material cause. And the efficient cause, remember, was what actually brought something into being. So we looked at the statue of the thinker, and we talked about the sculptor who brought that in. I believe his name is Rodin. And Rodin was the efficient cause of the thinker. And of course, the material cause was the bronze that the thinker was made out of. Well, the final cause is another one of Aristotle's causes. First, telos is Greek for an end, or a purpose, or a goal. And if something were said to have telos, then it would have a final cause. So this is related to Aristotle's final cause. It's the reason for which an effect is produced. So in the case of Rodin's statue, he produced that so that he could produce art and people could look at it, and so that they could be moved by it or think that it was a good representative of a human form. Whatever those reasons were that he made it would be what we put in for the final cause. And of course, telos gives us our word, that word. I'm not going to try it. I get tongue-tied and then it won't come out. But basically, this is a study of purposes, and when we look at the nature, the universe, and we see things that seem to have an end or a purpose or a goal, then we have teleology. All right, specified complexity. Specified complexity. Before we get into the argument proper, we should talk about this. Anyone know the old man in the mountain? So, this is from Luana's adopted home state, New Hampshire. So if you look at this mountain, looks like there's a face here. This has since crumbled. In 2003, this came apart. But this was like, it's on their quarter, I believe, the New Hampshire quarter. So you can kind of see a face there, right? Somewhat similar to these, right? Or can we tell a difference? Yeah, there's a huge difference in these, right? One of them is our mind kind of, oh yeah, I can kind of make out a face. Obviously this one, we can look at this and go, this was man-made. This was not something made from wind, rain, time, erosion. Again, I don't know if you can tell with it being darker in the projector, but this is just some sharp rocks, some sharp gravel. In contrast to, right, yeah, these are sharp rocks. But obviously these have an end, they have a purpose, they have a design, a goal for them. Pardon?
They're Christmas trees.
Christmas trees, that's right. Sand ripples, wind sets up this pattern. You can see it looks like they had some maybe crosswind over here to get this distance pattern. Right? There's specified complexity here. So we know that this wasn't just left by nature. So we're going to be looking for the same telltale signs in the universe at large, at life, in our solar system, to see if we can see the fingerprints of a designer. Intelligent causes. No reasonable person would conclude that Mount Rushmore, an arrowhead, a shoe print in the sand are there from natural means alone or event causation. This wasn't something like a domino hitting a domino, hitting a domino, hitting a domino. That was agent causation. We know how to differentiate intelligent cause or agent causation. Anytime we choose to do something as agents, agent causation. We're the ones that can actually kick the dominoes off because God has given us the ability to act as agents. Information comes from minds and has specified complexity. So let's look at specified complexity. When we see specified complexity, we know that it was produced by agent causation. So what do we mean by specified complexity? Well, it's two words, so let's just look at them individually first. When we specify something, we are talking about an order or a pattern to mention or name specifically or definitely, state in detail to give a specific character to set forth as a specification. Complexity is composed of many interconnected parts, compound, composite, very complicated and involved arrangement of parts, something that's unlikely to just randomly come into existence, that particular arrangement. So the specification alone tell us or let us know that there was an event causation or an intelligent cause behind it. So when we look at a crystal, inside a crystalline structure, there is a lattice of how all of the molecules will regularly form. And specification alone doesn't necessarily mean there is an agent who formed this, because the angles that these molecules bond at is at a specified angle, and it's a repeating pattern, and from those tiny molecules forming at that regular interval, we grow out quartz crystals or diamond crystals or crystals of all types of shapes. So simple repeated patterns can form without intelligent causes, even those patterns have specificity. Now, we could take a step further and talk about how these atoms actually got there. That'd be another level, but I'm talking about just the crystals themselves. This crystal was made through natural causes, not through man-made causes. Does complexity alone, is that enough for agent causation? In the recent debate between Wallace Marshall and I forgot the gentleman's name, it was in the upstate, they were talking about the teleological argument. And Wallace was given some numbers about how unlikely it was for certain things to happen, and we'll look at those later on in the lesson. And the atheist countered that he could very well go to his college, hand out 1,000 of these little flags, give them one to each student, go out throughout the campus and put those in various spots of their choosing. And the exact arrangement of those flags would be highly unlikely, highly improbable, and if you calculated the math behind it, it would give us astronomical numbers. And that all of what he said is true. What that is missing, though, is specificity. It's complex, sure, but there's no information being transferred from that complexity. It's rare. It would be unlikely to happen again if we try to repeat that, but there's no specified information coming from that particular arrangement of flags. So complexity alone does not guarantee an intelligent cause. So we can have a complex arrangement of Mount Everest. The exact shape that Mount Everest has is very complex and unlikely to be exactly duplicated in another mountain. But that shape is from, obviously, wind, erosion, plate tectonics. We don't think someone actually hand chiseled out all of Mount Everest. We know that was event causation, not agent causation. But when we get specificity and complexity together, then we know we have something to think about. So specified complexity, all information is conveyed via a specified medium, such as this sentence. This sentence has specified complexity. There's a very unique ordering of the letters, and those letters are highly unlikely to be arranged in that way, but there's also information that's specified. So these letters in this arrangement specify information that my mind is transferring, hopefully, to your minds. When we encounter specified complexity, we recognize it for what it is. So here is the argument proper for the teleological argument. The universe is finely tuned for life. The fine-tuning of the universe is the result of physical necessity, chance, or design. One of those options are it. The fine-tuning of the universe is not the result of physical necessity or chance. It's the next premise. Therefore, the fine-tuning of the universe is the result of design. Now, what we are not saying, fine-tuning is not a synonym for design. So sometimes people will object to say we're sneaking in design in our first premise. That's not the case. All we're saying is the precision to which our universe is structured.
Mike, can that be, you've got down there as a result of design, but could it also be physical necessity?
We're going to look at whether it could be, because these are the first. This premise just attempts. The second premise attempts to identify all the possible causes of the fine tuning. It could be physical necessity. It's of its nature, well, or chance, or design. So let's look at the structure, because I think it'll help see why these are the three only possible solutions. So. This isn't as bright as I'd hoped, but this says the universe is fine-tuned. That's basically the first premise. The second premise, 2a, says the fine-tuning is of its nature. It's by its nature to be fine-tuned. In philosophy, we like very precise language, so we like either A or not A. And if I can set up an A or not A, then everything either has to be A or not A. This is called the law of excluded middle. It goes hand in hand with the law of non-contradiction that we talked about a few weeks back. But basically, if you could say a shape is either a square or is a not square. It can't be, there's no in between. It can't be somewhat square and somewhat not square. It's the law of excluded middle. So we're going to exclude the middle here by giving something that's the exact opposite. So either the fine-tuning is of its nature, of the universe's nature, or the fine-tuning is not of its nature. Those are their two options. Now, this has two sub-options. If the fine-tuning is not of the universe's nature, then the fine-tuning could be by chance. That's an option, just happened to be that way. And then we're going to exclude the middle again, and we're going to say the fine-tuning is not by chance. So these are and so in order to get a fourth option, one of these would have to have another sub-options where we could get down into detail and exclude the middle more. But this seems to be all of the options, and I haven't heard anyone argue, oh, that you've missed this option when this argument is proffered. So that gives us our three options. It's of its nature, physical necessity, or it's by chance, and if it's not by chance, then it's by design. So not chance and design are synonymous there. And of course, we're going to rule out that the fine-tuning is of the nature of the universe. We're going to rule out that it's by chance, so the only option left to us is that it's by design. So that's the structure of this argument. Questions? Yes.
When you say the fine-tuning is either of its nature or not of its nature, what do you mean by that statement?
So, is it of the nature of planets to have radioactive elements in their crust? Could you have a planet without radioactive elements in its crust?
Perhaps.
Yeah. At least the level that we have, because the radioactive elements in our crust drive plate tectonics. That drives a whole cycle of renewing rocks and helps provide nutrients for life to happen. Is it of the nature of universes to be highly ordered? Could you have a disordered universe? So the initial entropy conditions, which is what one of the things we'll be talking about of the universe, were extremely high entropy. So that ordering of our universe is highly unlikely, or unless it's by physical necessity. Is it the physical necessity of solar systems that their sun be calm and not shoot out solar flares all the time? Well, that actually, I just saw an article where scientists are surprised at the size of our sun, how relatively calm it is, because when they look at other suns they see of similar age and size as ours, they're shooting out solar flares a lot. And of course, if a solar flare heads in our direction, it could be bye-bye for civilization. We have the large planet Jupiter. Is it of physical necessity that solar systems have a large planet Jupiter where ours is, so that it can absorb comets and keep them from hitting us? So that would be physical necessity. If it's of its very nature to be that way, it can't be any other way.
It almost seems like it could be, though. You could almost make that argument, especially going back to your picture of the crystal. For that crystal to be the crystal, those molecules or atoms have to be aligned in that fashion, and it is part of its nature to align itself that way, right?
Yes. So we wouldn't call it a crystal unless it was in line like that.
So we couldn't really call it a universe unless it was aligned in such a fashion as what we're used to seeing and we call universe.
Potentially, but we have computer model simulations of universes with all types of different properties based on our current laws. We just change the constants or the initial quantities. So when we look at our universe, we just have to ask ourselves, does it seem like it's necessarily this way, or is it contingent? Could it have been otherwise? And if it could have been otherwise, then it's not of its nature. Okay. Any other questions? That it?
I'm not going to distract you.
Yeah.
I want to let you keep.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not fully with you, but.
All right. Yeah. So let me try to give one more example and maybe help.
It's okay.
Okay. All right. So support for the premises, is the universe finely tuned? Because lots of people argue it's not finely tuned. So let's talk about that. This argument has been waged on several, I'll say, levels, and we're going to be scratching the surface today. To delve into all the facts of any one of these levels would be a multi-class course, and you would be learning a lot about science, quantum mechanics, biology. We're not going to delve that, but I'm going to give you a brief thumbnail sketch, and we're going to cover the basics. So life, is life finely tuned? DNA, we look at DNA, obviously there's specified complexity there. Paul, you write software code, right?
Yep.
Bill Gates has been quoted to say that the DNA is more complex than any software code imaginable.
Oh, yeah.
And so he would never hire random forces to develop software code, right? Maybe he does. Well, the Unix and Linux guys would never. That's good. Oh yeah, okay. And Apple would never. Right. And then recently we found out, scientists used to think that there was gene encoding DNA and then a bunch of junk DNA. And then recent breakthroughs have said, no, this DNA is not junk. It is actually turning, it's like the control for this protein stuff. It's actually doing work. So when you look at all those things that say our DNA is so much percentage close to a chimpanzee, all they're talking about is the part that makes proteins. They're not talking about the part that is the control function for those proteins. So, but what, all right. So God used the same proteins in us and chimps. Okay, I'm fine with that. The Earth. We already mentioned some of these, but our percentage of oxygen, the amount of water we have. Saw an article just this week about how rare it is for us to have as much water, because scientists normally see no water at all or whole lots of water. They don't see this middle ground of water in terrestrial planets around stars. The thickness of our crust, the radioactive elements in our crust, the tilt of our planet, the distance from our sun. All of these are fine-tuned. The Earth and Moon pair. The Moon does a whole lot of good for us, and the fact of where it is and how it holds our planet still helps stabilize our tilt, gives tide, so the waters around the ocean are mixing. A lot of good stuff. Our solar system, the sun, size, calmness, Jupiter saving us. The actual position of the asteroid belts are good for us. Just more facts. Our galaxy. We are positioned in our galaxy not so far that we get flung off and we're just all by our lonesome hurling through space, because there are some stars like that. So we're not that far away, but we're not so close that we're where all the action is, because we don't want to be where all the action is, close to the center of our galaxy. We are just the right distance from our galaxy, so to speak. And then we're actually in the arm that we're in, we're kind of hanging out by ourselves, which is good, because we wouldn't want a star very close to us to kind of help ruin our day. Also, there's a lot of dust between us and the very center of our galaxy. And I'm told, I don't know, but I'm told that if that dust were not there, we would be able to read a newspaper at night just from the light from the inside of our galaxy. That's how bright all that action is. So also a good thing, because we don't want that radiation that dust is helping. And then the universe itself, and then this is where we're talking about the constants and quantities. Scientists, beginning with Kepler, Newton, started to observe regular occurrences of nature. They found out that these regular occurrences obeyed mathematical laws. They put them down on paper, and we have equations. Those equations have constants in them, and then there's also just quantities in our universe, like the ratio of matter to antimatter. Remember, we talked about the warp drives last week and how antimatter and matter annihilate each other when they come together. Well, we happen to have a whole lot of matter and not a whole lot of antimatter. That's a good thing. So that is in support of the fact of that first premise that yes, our universe is finely tuned for us to exist. Some of those constants and quantities. So maybe you know this equation or not, but the force of attraction between any two objects, y'all's gravity right now is weighing me down, but not as much as the Earth, is equal to the mass of those two objects divided by the radius of the distance between them, multiplied by this g, and this g is the gravitational constant. Now you notice, if you know anything about numbers, this is a very, 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 very small number. Gravity is a weak force when we compare it to other forces like magnetism, the strong force that holds these two things together. If it were to vary by 1 in 10 to the 60th of its over its possible range, then the universe would not be life permitting. Now, I know this is just for support, but I'll just say, some people say, well, not life like our life. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying basic chemistry would break down if gravity were much larger than what it is, because you just wouldn't have molecules. My molecules, the chemical bonds between molecules in me, is fighting the force of gravity now, because look how tall I am above the Earth, right? Instead of being all squinched down. Or if gravity was much weaker, then we could all fly apart, galaxies would never form, we'd never have stars, etc. So this is just one of the constants. We're not going to dive into all of them, but there are numerous constants like this in our equations that don't seem to be of physical necessity that this would be this way. Seems to be finely tuned in the range of life-permitting values. And then remember last week we were talking about entropy and how when we look at the universe, our gas tank still has usable energy in it. It's not all used up, but we are slowly converting usable energy to non-usable energy. Roger Penrose, who wrote some papers with Stephen Hawking of Oxford, calculated the odds of our universe's low entropy condition, which low entropy means a lot of order, high entropy means a lot of disorder, as a chance of 1 in 10 to the 10 to the 123. Now I know even for a mathematician that number is hard to think about. So let's talk about this number. So anytime we have 10 to the 2, right? 10 to the 2, that would be a 1 with 2 zeros behind it. So 100. 10 squared is 100. Okay? Now let me show you how big this number quickly gets. 10 to the 10 to the 3, that doesn't seem that big, right? Well, this is 10, if we follow our same rule, to the 1,000, which is 1 with 1,000 zeros behind it. Okay? This number is 10 to the 123. So 10 to the 123, that many zeros behind a 1. So that is the precision of which our entropy, our low entropy state, was first in the creation of the universe. So let's talk about entropy's chances. We all know Bob Barker. We have this wheel. Let's assume that instead of the wheel with 20 sides like he has, we have a wheel with 10 to the 80 sides. And I just picked that because there's approximately 10 to the 80 subatomic particles in our universe. So remember, subatomic particles, an atom is made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. There's about 1 with 80 zeros behind it of those in our universe. Okay? So if we had a wheel with that many sides on it, and we started spinning it, and we tried to get the exact spot on it, every time we spin it, we would have a 1 in 10 to the 80 to get it right, a 1 in 10 to the 160 if we spin it twice and got it right. If we spin it 3 times and got it right, it'd be 1 in 10 to the 240. Obviously, you see, just getting it right once is crazy. It's crazy. We get crazy when, on Let's Make a Deal, they pick the right one and there's 3 choices, at the end. This is crazy. So you would see that you would have to get this number to be a 1 with 100 with a 10 to the 123 zeros behind it. So this is a lot of spinnings. You don't have enough time, since now from creation to do that. So you're telling me there's a chance? That's an off-quoted line from one, a funny movie. I'll leave it at that. But basically, this man goes up to this woman and he says, "So what's the chances of a guy like me marrying a girl like you?" And he says, 1 in 10, 1 in 100. And she says, more like 1 in a million. And he says, "So you're telling me there's a chance?" So that's what the atheists who want to say, due to chance, they're against crazy odds. So, the fine-tuning of the universe. This is Richard Dawkins, and he says that living objects look designed. They look overwhelmingly as though they're designed. Biology is the study of complicated things which give the impression of having been designed for a purpose. And of course, he goes on to tell why he thinks we can get around that. Francis Crick says biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see is not designed, but rather evolved. So, obviously, the universe at least appears even to these well-known atheists that, at least from life, it's highly designed. We've already talked through this a lot of what we talked about with Jay. But basically, to say of its nature would be to say that it's of its nature to be that way, and it couldn't be otherwise. And then we talked about the chances of it happening, at least for a couple of the constants. So chance we've already covered, not exhaustively, because basically what you do is you take some of these particular things and you start multiplying them together, and then you get this very, very, very improbably low number. There's nothing in the nature of life, Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, or the universe that would cause it to be finely tuned by its nature. Nothing that we're aware of. Some scientists will pose, well, we just give us time and we'll figure out why it has to be this way. And that's really science of the gaps. Long time ago, there was God of the gaps, where people just attributed thunder to God. Intelligent design isn't God of the gaps, and we can talk about that because that's a detailed why it's not God of the gaps. Because we are giving a positive argument for why it has to be agent causation. But when scientists say, well, one day we'll figure out why it has to necessarily be this way, then they are using the same argument that people use with Thor and thunder. So objections to the premises, we've already kind of talked about some of these. Intelligent design and fine-tuning arguments are not science. They're just not. We're trying to sneak religion in. This is something you'll hear if you try to offer these. And I want to ask, by what definition of science are they excluding intelligent design? If it's by this definition, a repeatable, controllable, experimental, yes, it's not that type of science.
Which is classic science.
Right, that's classic science. But we have a lot of branches of science that aren't classic science, like evolution, paleontology, forensic science. Forensic science is a perfect example because these policemen have to go in and they have to take evidence and they have to look at this very specific way things are. Then they have to reason to decide whether this was an event causation. Did this person die from some domino of events? Or was there agent causation? Right? That is the science of forensics. And intelligent design is just that. We're looking back at our universe and we're saying, is this possible to be event causation just with no intelligent intervention, or was there agent causation? Intelligent design and fine-tuning follow the same rules as the above sciences. Here's a well-known guy, Stephen Meyer. He says, if you're trying to explain an event in the remote past, you should rely on our knowledge of the cause and effect structure of the world, and you should be looking for a cause that has the capability or power to produce the known effect in question. So in our case, it's the universe, life, the fine-tuning of our solar system, etc. Darwin's mentor, Charles Lyell, put it this way: in investigating the past, we should be looking for causes now in operation. Now is the information and intelligence. What is the cause now in operation of digital information? That is intelligence. By using Darwin's own principle of reasoning, we can use an inference, the best explanation. Intelligence produces information. Obviously, we have lots of information everywhere, most importantly in our DNA. Another objection, well, this is just a catch-all objection. Most of the time, if you present this argument, which is not necessarily an easy argument to carry in the public, because we've had like 3 centuries of scientists trying to show us why this argument is false. A lot of people have some ideas about how evolution or other things could account for why we're here. So you need to have a lot of facts memorized or at least written down and study up on this argument. Another objection is that the universe is here. The fact that the universe and the earth is here shows that it's possible by natural processes. Hey, it's improbable, yes, but we're here, and we couldn't be having the discussion if we weren't here, so obviously, yeah, it's here. The response: this is analogous to arguing that the fact of a painting or a building is here shows that it was done by purely natural process. We can look at something, infer intelligence, same way we can do with the universe. There's a counterexample given this of a firing squad. Let's say a criminal is marched out in front of a firing squad with 25 marksmen, all adept in their field, and the command to give is given to fire. They fire, and a criminal walks out alive. Well, he's there, right? There's nothing to explain there. He wouldn't be alive if they hadn't all missed, right? No. You would want to know, how in the world did this happen? This is a very unusual circumstance, and it needs an explanation. It's not just, hey, I'm here. So.
They're assuming they're completed.
Right. Yeah.
Before they even start.
Yeah, they're assuming it's by chance, and then we're here. So, yeah, it's improbable, but we're here. It's a good point. Another objection: Darwin showed that evolution and natural selection are capable of producing life, which appears to be designed. So this is where Richard Dawkins wants to go. Natural selection is the blind watchmaker, in reference to Paley's watchmaker, because it does not see ahead, does not plan consequences, has no purpose in view, yet the living results of natural selection overwhelmingly impress us with the appearance of design, as if by a master watchmaker impress us with the illusion of design and planning. The response: evolution in principle only works on life, right? The finches, even if we grant that the finch's beaks can produce new species, there has to be information there to begin with on which genetic mutations can occur. So first of all, you got to get the game started in order for it to even work.
Evolution. The term evolution is used very loosely.
Right, and here's the second one. Evolution has been demonstrated on a micro scale, yes. When it would rain, finches with smaller beaks, that could get to the flowers faster would do better, and their population numbers would increase. When it was a drought, the seeds would be harder, and the ones with larger beaks, stronger, could get to the seeds. That's fine. That just says that the information is adaptable. That shows actually design to me, but it's never been shown on a macro scale, and just extrapolating out doesn't work. Any of y'all have Dalmatian dogs? I know I'm running close on time. Dalmatians lots of times are deaf because they've been breeded, highly selected for that particular coat. And of course we get some bad things in there. Of course you put that Dalmatian in there with a Great Dane and with a Bulldog and a Mastiff, and what you end up with mutts again. And God has designed our biology to actually prefer mutts because mutts have the most adaptability in their genome. They can adapt to more things because they have more variation. In the absence of an absurdly improbable accident, the observations of modern science seem to suggest an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. It's a Nobel laureate. All right, so this argument goes all over the place because remember we talked about there's life, there's Earth, solar system, our galaxy. So here's an objection to the fine-tuning we talked about with entropy. There could just be a multiverse, not a universe, one multiverse. This doesn't. By the way, this doesn't talk about the hymns that we sing. It's not like. So some people posit a multiverse, which is responsible for spinning off many universes. One of these universes was by chance able to support complex life. Problems with this: one, there's no evidence for the multiverse. It's purely an ad hoc attempt to get around fine-tuning. Two, the multiverse itself would have to be fine-tuned in order to verify that, one, it's producing all these different types of universes. So I got to produce this type, and then I got to add one to it and produce this type, and I got to add one to it and produce this type. That mechanism would be finely tuned in and of itself. All right, so what we learned about God from the teleological argument: God is wise. God is creative. We looked at the natural order. We see God's, just multiplied creativeness in flowers and fish and whales. God's powerful. Not only does he know how, but he can bring about. God is humorous, maybe? Psalm 19 says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship day after day. They continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or a word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world." We're losing some of that. This is what the inner city sky looks like. And as you get closer and closer and closer, or actually further and further and further away from all that light pollution, you can see the light. We miss the grandeur of God's design just from all of our lights. In fact, this is what I was researching before. Back in the 1990s earthquake in Los Angeles, remember the big one that hit during the World Series? People called 911 because they thought, what is this in the sky? And they thought it was responsible for the earthquake. And all it was the Milky Way. That they had never seen the Milky Way stretching across the sky nor knew what it was. Romans 1 says, "They know that the truth about God because he has made it obvious to them. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, so that they have no excuse for not knowing God." All right, so that's the teleological argument. We see fine-tuning. Fine-tuning can either be from those three choices. It can't be from physical necessity or chance, so it has to be by design. So here's where we'll be next week. Still on point number 3, we'll give you another argument. We'll give you the moral argument for God's existence. Charlie, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
Father, thank you for this opportunity to engage our minds about the greatest topic in the world, it's you. Thank you for the way you designed us, the way you created us. Thank you for sending Christ to be our Savior, for forgiveness of sins, and the possibility of walking with you daily.
Thanks.